Hey, Anya, thank you for coming in today. And you have this marvelous background of contribution and impact and tremendous amount of work across many, many dimensions. So thank you for sharing your insights with my audience.
Dude, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my experience.
So Anya, what were the maybe two or three inflection points in your life that made this wonderful person you are today? And it could have been when you were 3 or 5 years old, or 10 or 15. It could be inside the family, outside the family. It could have been mentors, teachers. It could have been jobs you had,
Yeah.
excuse me, or other defining moments. What were those inflection points that made you who you are today?
Yeah, I can definitely attribute some of the work ethic I have to my family. I'm a first generation immigrant from Russia. So I got to see how my grandpa did a lot of impact in my home community, both as a surgeon, both as a runner. He kind of promoted that. And that ethic is something I took when I came here to the US. And I was really focused on hard work. And what I found is one of the inflection points is that no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough.
Yeah.
There was always a sense of, there's always more and more and more. And I had this point where I'm looking around, and on the one hand, on paper, things look great, right? I have a beautiful family, great house, like, the thing you want, all the things you think you should be having. And yet I was imploding. And I was sensing like, why am I getting frustrated where I want to work more instead of spend evenings with my children, right? I'm like, still like, what am I really chasing? And so I had this understanding like, just working hard in itself is not enough, and there has to be another way. And I still decided that, to get that other way, I'm gonna get my, advanced degrees, change careers. I still followed the shoulds to try to piece that puzzle together. And then more recently, I got laid off from Meta after 7 years. And I'm really grateful for that experience because it made me really have to figure out what is the other path for me. It really shifted the paradigm for me following this traditional path and saying like, okay, there's no more excuses not to go for something. And that's where I started my entrepreneurship journey. And it really made me aware of the limits that I was imposing on myself, the artificial limits, the artificial confines of saying, okay, I am this person in a corporate setting. I am this person with this title. I am this person in relation to where I am with my peers. And then when you get out of that structure, you realize that those limits are very self-imposed, and that what you can do in the world is very much just a factor of what you aspire to, of the connections you make, of you feeling confident in your ability to learn. And so those two inflection points were really meaningful for me.
So you come from an immigrant background, so that makes you want to strive harder and also really emphasizes the educational aspect, right? And so when
Yes.
you were really young, were you sort of, what were the things that you were really interested in?
You know, I wouldn't say that there's something super, incredibly unique about me, and I put that in like, but I can recall that I always had this theme of really being okay with challenges. So, for example, when I was 6, I came to the US, I didn't speak English, and I got put into kindergarten or first grade and not knowing the language. And I was, okay, that's normal, right? If you don't know something different, then those adversities don't seem to be that difficult. You're just like, okay, I'm going to deal with it. And then later on in life, when I was a little bit older, I got sent to go to Russia in 5th grade without speaking barely some Russian, reading and writing, so I can be with my family. So again, there were plenty of points throughout my journey where I just had to confront challenging situations and just rise up to the occasion, like, learn more, put my head down. And so I normalized the behavior of like, if you're confronted with something difficult in your life, you can make it happen, not by making it a huge deal, but just really, doing it. So I don't necessarily think that there's something specific about me that I wasn't a star athlete. I wasn't standing out and doing some kind of crazy stuff, but I always normalized the experience of being okay with challenges, leaning into them and knowing that I will grow from them. And I think that really, that simple, gritty exercise is really what's made the difference. And as I got older, I tuned in to like, how can I take that ability to confront adversity and then really align it to my purpose and really channel it to also not just work harder, but align to like, how do I also balance doing and not doing? How do I balance of also restoring myself. Because one thing I learned about through my journey is that so often as high achievers, we focus on doing more, working hard, and we implode. And so what I learned through my journey is also not just about knowing how to confront adversity, which I faced through my challenge, but also restoring myself and finding that balance between like inner growth, between self-restoration and doing something purposeful externally.
When you were in, elementary school and high school, were you interested in, like, what kind of courses were you interested in at that time?
I when I was in high school, I skipped a couple of grades. So I went into junior grade after eighth grade due to Russian school and transitioning. I didn't have a specific focus. I did, the physics, I did the advanced classes, I did history. I like so many people, I didn't have a path, and I wish I did. I look at some of these incredible interns that I've supported through Meta. I see some of these young entrepreneurs who know what they want to do. I'm really impressed by that. But to everybody who hasn't had that path and maybe is still figuring out what they want to be when they grow up, like I was more of that person. And I think that there's a power to that. There's a power to not defining who you are or what you want to be at a young age, and just being open to saying, hey, I'm going to be open to the opportunities that lie in front of me and embrace them and help shape my path. So for me, out of college, for example, like I majored in global studies with a minor in human rights because I was passionate about government. I was like, I'm going to change the world, apply for a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that didn't happen. So I found like the best paying job after that. That had nothing to do with it. It was focused on recruiting. And I just followed that path. So while I think it's beneficial to have a set course, especially when you're younger, I think it could also be very challenging when you become rigid in your goals and destinations, and then you find that life doesn't quite guide you that way. So in a way, I'm grateful that I didn't have direction and was able to learn how to make the most of every opportunity and let that shape me and kind of find my purpose through that.
So I mean, it's really interesting, right? You are an immigrant, say, and you don't speak English, so you have to learn English. And then you get into the school program, and even early on when you were young, you went back to Russia, and then you weren't speaking Russian that well, so you had
Yeah.
to overcome that challenge. You had to
Yes.
overcome the English challenge and then the Russian challenge, and that created a mindset so that anytime there's a challenge, you don't think of it as a challenge. You think of it as, oh, that's some hurdle that I can learn or grow from.
Yeah.
And then when you're in high school, you have a lot of broad interests, so you don't really have a defined area. You're kind of just interested in everything.
Mhm.
And then what what caused you to choose the majors you did when you went to college? And can you talk a little bit about what you chose as your majors in college, and you got an MBA as well, right? So
Yes.
describe that journey, and then we'll go into Meta and that journey, and then what you're doing now.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'm gonna cheat and kind of bridge those a little bit. So in college, it's just really finding myself. And honestly, a lot of it was just like, here's what I traveled a lot. I have interest. Okay, I was thinking about doing economics as well because I was good at math and I like this. So it was really finding myself. And what I'm really grateful for is that later on in life, I went back and got my master's. And for funny, growing up in Russia, both my parents had masters. So I was like, oh, naturally. Like it's just a DNA thing that I'm going to have a master's, but it didn't happen right away after I graduated with my bachelor's. So what I find is that it took me a little bit longer to find things I'm interested in. And when I got my MBA and then I got my Master of Science in Computer Information Systems and Business Analytics, like I knew what I wanted to do at that point, right? At that point, I was like, oh, I love analytics. I want to figure out how to do some AI. I want to learn that. So my whole journey has been like, it's okay to not have maybe a clear path right here and then make the most of it. And then once you have more direction, zone in on that. What I want to say though is I was doing my MBAs and my masters while I was working at Meta full time. So it was also like every time you step outside the zone of like, your should path, you find like, hey, I can do more than I thought was possible. And even within Meta, while the people aspire to be there are a lot of people who want more out of life. And when I was sharing my way of like, hey, I'm going to get degrees, I'm expanding my horizons, so many people were like also finding that inspiration within themselves, like, oh, what can I do more? So it's never like we ever achieve, our final destination. It's always about being open to like what is calling me right now and challenging ourselves not to limit like our path and be rigid, but also like open ourselves up. And then our example shows to people around us like what they can also do more, and that's what I find really powerful. And so I'm also grateful for these kind of interviews because I hope it maybe it resonates with more people who don't feel like, hey, I wasn't that, super brilliant achiever early on. I didn't have a clear direction. Maybe still I'm finding what I want to do because whatever I'm doing right now is not quite fulfilling. And what I want to say is like, it's never too late, right? It's never too late to kind of see where you're being really rigid and where's this next opportunity. It really can be something where something really bad happens to you, or maybe hopefully not, but then it opens up something that you're like, okay, what do I really want to do? Like in that reflection, I think is really important.
So I'm just gonna kind of mine this a little bit further. So you're in college and you're kind of just sampling a lot of different things,
Yeah,
and because you like math, maybe it sounds like you did a bit of economics, but you did a
yeah,
variety of different courses.
yeah.
So your first degree was in what?
Global studies and a minor in human rights. So again, political science, and then I changed career. I changed majors from like accounting to microeconomics to then again global studies. I actually studied in 3 universities from U.S. to Prague to back to U.S. So I was all over the place finding myself.
I see. So um, you studied finance basically because you studied accounting and you studied economics, which gives you kind of a macro view
Yeah.
of finance, basically, I would say. Um, you global studies, so it's like general studies. You're getting a much broader view of what's happening. You did economics because of your math lab, but that sort of diverse spread is quite interesting,
Yeah.
and at 3 different universities as well. So it's giving you a lot of breadth, right? Um, and then you end up a degree in global studies with a minor in human rights, right? So you
Yes.
have the impact side, the social side, and then you applied to Meta. Was that your first job?
No, no, I first started working at Alaska Airlines. So again, I had a path of going through recruiting. So I was a contractor for Alaska Airlines. I worked then from booking.com. I worked at Amazon and then I worked at Meta. And the funny thing is that every time I was just pushing myself and like being very audacious, like I would take a contract role, convert to full time, and then be like, okay, I'm limited here. What's my next opportunity? So I did 3 contract roles where I converted full time. And at Amazon, after I converted full time, I took a contract role at Meta. And then Meta kind of captivated me enough to be there for almost 7 years. But every time, like my history wasn't like that. I'm like this incredible wonder kid, but I was always open to take the risk. If I felt inside of me that I need to grow and that there's something is limiting me, I learned to also just embrace that challenge. Even though it's not like it's not scary, it's not that I'm like perfect. It's just that I don't want to live with the regret. And yeah, I think you have to embrace those things in life to really live fully because we only have this short amount of time. Let's make the best impact we can. I think you might be muted, Stephen.
So you're working in recruiting and um, you go under contract. So you go booking.com, there's Alaska Airlines, there's Amazon, and then you do Meta and you were always converted those into a job. And then you stayed the longest at Meta. So there's a lot of things there, right?
Yeah.
What did you learn in those different cultures from Alaska Airlines to Booking.com to AWS, I mean Amazon, and recruiting and into Meta? What does recruiting mean? And then what did you learn in those different cultures when you were recruiting?
Yeah.
And how does those lessons learned help guide you today?
Great question. As since I'm working on a startup right now, you might think like, okay, well, recruiting, how does this really help you? I had this preconceived notion that I had to be like this AI cancer curing fintech expert to be an entrepreneur, right? To hit like all the boxes out there. And I realized that actually a core part of entrepreneurship and being a startup owner is founded in soft skills. It's being able to understand the person in front of you, whether it's your stakeholder, your customer, your investor. It's also being able to connect with people authentically. And so in recruiting, what I was able to do is learn those soft skills. It's to understand like what are the motivations, intentions, desires of the person in front of me, whether it's my client or the leader I'm serving, or whether it's the person that I'm trying to support in their career journey. And so those things were very valuable to me. And then you have to be also strategic around creating like plans and programs. So I learned in my journey, like as an entrepreneur, how to create a lot of structure from ambiguity, and also how to create like people supported strategies. So how do I infuse the feedback from my clients to understand like customer validation, to understand like how we're going to have a technical roadmap that's going to be validated every step of the way. So that's one thing. The second thing is about culture, the pros and cons. So one thing that I'm going to talk about Alaska Airlines. If somebody has not heard it, it's a company focused out of Seattle, Washington. They're mainly US dominant. If this is an international, if you're listening from international space and haven't heard of them before. But what they have, which you'll be amazed, is they have incredible retention of employees. Some of the people that I've worked with probably like over a decade ago, a lot of them are still there. And it's not like it's the highest paying job, like absolutely no offense to that, but something that they're doing there is working really well for people to feel like they belong. At the same time, I was working at Meta, and when I started, it felt like Wonderland. You know, you go there, there's like a Hogwarts theme of an office in Menlo Park where they give you free food and desserts, and they feed you, give you all the snacks. And that was an incredible environment. And I also got to see how when you empower your employees or just the team around you to feel like they're capable and you give them autonomy, what a work culture that creates. At the same time, transparently, you also see like what are the pain points of a company when it grows and scales, right? And you also see how sometimes to me, this is my take, sometimes putting the bottom line can really hurt your culture. So for me, for example, when we had layoffs and different seasons of it, I got to see like what harm I could say like to the culture that was having, and like not choosing to maybe present like for leadership to address things in a certain way was harming the culture. So to the point is like the culture of a company can really dictate the success of their endeavors. So that's something that I obviously take really to heart, because as a owner, as a founder, as a startup, you are the culture champion. Like people are going to look to you to see like what are they going to emulate and create around you for their culture and the company. So that's something I take very seriously, because I see those examples, both good and bad, or kind of just opportunities to learn, and I'm using that as my journey too.
So you have a founder culture, or I mean, there's founders Booking.com, and there's founders at Amazon, there's founders at Meta. Did you ever get a chance to meet the founders?
The closest I did is I worked with Cheryl, the former I forget her title. I think something. Oh, Chief Cheryl Sandberg. We worked on a diversity event. I worked with mainly like Cheryl Sandberg, who was closest aligned to our diversity and recruiting efforts. I also got like recognition for some of the analytics I was doing, even as a recruiter, for building like custom dashboards around PhD hiring, which was what I was in. So not that I worked with them like one-on-one, they weren't my buddies, but they were definitely examples that I got to learn a lot from that. And I'm very grateful for that too. It's like I did get to see a lot of close role models and leaders who were incredible and very passionate about what they do, and also see how their leadership evolves through different challenges. Like, it was Cambridge Analytica happened, COVID happened, this happened. And a lot of times the leaders were amazing. So you get to see people rise up to the challenge and learn a lot from them. And I'm very grateful for that.
And then when you were at Meta, you were working on your MBA and your master's in science on doing analytics and things like that, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I actually did that right as one of those crazy people. I did those right after my mat leaves. So I had 2 maternity leaves. After my first one, I was like, you know what? What I'm missing in my life right now between having a new child and working full time is an MBA. So I applied and I got in. I got support from my my manager as well around that. And that was a good like highlight for me that, sorry, hey Baba, there's never a perfect, sorry, I'll cut that. What I learned from that is that it's never a perfect time to start anything, right? It's never going to be like, hey, there's going to be a pristine time. You're going to have no worries. It's going to be, your schedule's going to be free. So it pushed me to say, hey, when life gets really busy, or you're a mom, maybe juggling kids around you like me, you learn to prioritize. You learn to get really focused. And I look at that as a superpower as well now as a mom. As a startup founder, like people have different priorities. Maybe they're motivated by like the money, the success, the whatnot, the fame. And I get that I still have a lot of that in me, but I really want to make an impact. Like I want to show my kids that more is possible for them. I want them to know that like there's innovation that maybe will support them as well. Like one of our themes is around youth empowerment as well. Like we're exploring that. So I recognize that I'm more focused because I know that where my boundaries are and my purpose, and also what motivates me isn't quite the same as maybe it was if I wasn't a mom or was a little bit younger in my journey.
So, in your master's, you did, like analytics and things like that. So you learned to code as well.
I learned to code when I was 30. So it's like in one of those things, I don't know if it's a paradigm, but I always thought like technical people were like this kind of person, and I'm not that kind of person. And there's something powerful that happens when you bridge that paradigm, when you think like, okay, really, it was just a limit in my head again, where I was like, okay, I thought like you have to be in your bachelor's degree, get into coding, otherwise it's too late for you. And it wasn't. So what's cute is also my dad is a database administrator. So I remember him helping me out with like SQL database coding when I was first starting out. And so I learned that nothing is impossible for me if I just keep at it. Like that's what's really incredibly powerful is like if you're listening to this and want to develop a superpower, is find something you're interested in learning and just start with very small steps and don't give up. And I know it sounds very easy, but it really is something powerful when you realize like, what can I not do? Like if it's humanly possible, then there's a way to do it. And if I break it down to small steps, then and I keep at it, I keep learning, I keep refining, what can I not do? And that's hugely powerful. Even though as an entrepreneur, I get doubts in my head, I have all this stuff, that's like da 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 da, worries, fear, and then I go back to the compass, like, well, look at back into your career, you were able to do X, Y, Z, and every time you learn something new, whether it's a parent, whether it's degrees, whether it's coding, whether it's creating a podcast from scratch, whether it's now creating a startup, like all those things had no clue how to do, and you made it happen.
So now let's talk about your entrepreneurship journey. So you're left Meta, and you got these 3 degrees. You got all of these background, social skill, I mean, interpersonal skills, communication skills, relationship capabilities. You have analytical capabilities. Earlier you had taken accounting and things like that. So you have a macro, micro view of finances. I mean, you have you like math, so you got a really big background, and you worked across all of these different companies, and so you'd understand, what makes those companies work. So now let's describe your entrepreneurship journey.
Thank you. I love that. I want to say that I did like a slight diversion around entrepreneurship in the sense that I decided to create a podcast right after Meta because I was really thinking like I love learning. What can I do to learn from others and also share my learnings? So my first step was creating a podcast called Right Off Track, hinting at it's perfectly fine to go off the common road and find what's truly yours. And I interviewed, I think I probably had almost like 80 episodes before I started the startup, where I interviewed entrepreneurs from around the world. And what was really amazing for me is that I learned that I could reach out to people who are doing incredible things and they would respond to me and give me their time and I can learn from them. Like similar to you, like again, every step empowers you to expand your soft skills, expand these capabilities. And then I also saw the delta between here I'm in corporate, I see leaders, I see innovators, but I also see that there's a little bit of stagnation that happens with growth. I see that there's a burnout. I see that there's a lack of fulfillment and purpose in some cases. And then when I interviewed people on the podcast, I saw that, yes, they're busy. Yes, they're challenged, but they have a different energy around them. Like they feel fulfilled. They're doing something that inspires them. Even if they fail, they keep at it because they have that motivation. And so that got me really curious about what is different about the people who are maybe confined in feeling those limits and people who, yes, are challenged, but have a different sense of purpose and motivation with their success. And that got me to realize like what's different about the second group is that they are very introspective. They understand their purpose. They find ways to explore to enhance their self-discovery process, right? It's not that everybody has the same motivation or purpose or it's a one-size-fit-all approach, but they spend time understanding themselves in a world that's too busy and telling you like you're late, you're always late, you're never doing enough. They actually took the time to slow down and to center around themselves. Like not that they're less busy, but they're more intentional. And that's what inspired me to create, in this case, SelfFull, our app, which is around self-discovery. And we're taking my dorkiness and that love for like discovery, AI, technology, and thinking about how can I actually serve people. So transparently, although investors will hate this, I say like I'm not just motivated by, maximizing returns and being in the most niche market, but I really wanted to think about how can I do something that makes a difference because we can all make money, but in the long game, like I want to do something that actually helps. So as a startup, I started out by just thinking about like, hey, and I want to preface like right now is an incredible time to also be a startup owner and entrepreneur because it's so much more accessible to use, AI. There's no code app builders. There's all of these solutions that make it easier for you to refine your idea, to test it out without you having to be an expert in all these areas. So I think it's a remarkable time and opportunity to seize. So that's what I did. I found out what is the easiest way to me to prototype something. I used my, soft skills to engage people to try out the beta. I refined our concept from like gamified microlearning to personalized AI accountability. And we narrowed down the use case to also be focused on coaches because it just happened to be the demographic that was interested in putting down money. So all that to say, like I was really focused on the problem, like how can I take the idea from my head and not just be like, I'm right, but really say, how can I make the idea valuable to people, really zone in a specific use case that then, yes, can have business traction, but really serves a certain demographic, similar to like Facebook when they started with a college use case. Like everybody who had a successful startup usually had a small use case, and we got really intentional about that. And then I also really learned to pivot. So every step of the way, it's not like, oh, this is the same idea it was almost a year ago. It changed almost every month. It changed a little bit. And I had to own in that decision of not just being right, but saying, hey, we've changed. The idea changed. The audience has changed. So the idea has to keep on evolving. And that's where also I learned not to be rigid and trust my gut when something is no longer flowing. Let's be very intentional about what's the priority right now and how can we capitalize on quickly. So next month we are preparing to fundraise, which I don't know by the time this comes out, we're preparing for our first fundraise. And I'm just incredibly grateful for reflecting, again, just less than a year ago, I started this journey. And here I am, I have an incredible network. I have incredible peers and mentors and allies. I've been part of accelerators that have helped me grow. And I'm doing something I thought would be completely impossible just a short time from now. And again, it's one of those steps when you go for the impossible, despite, your fears, your hesitations, the challenges, you show up, you do your best, you focus on learning. And again, I don't think anything is impossible when you go for that. And I also just wrap with say, I hope that example will help others feel like they can do more. Because there's nothing that was crazy unique about me. I wasn't like the most motivated person. I didn't have a set track. I was finding myself all along. And here I am doing something I thought was impossible and working with people who are purposeful and trying to make the world a better place. So can't be happier.
So on your startup, SelfFull,
Yeah.
are you using like Microsoft tech stack or Google, or is there Amazon?
Great question. So I'm part of probably all the startup programs, which are amazing. So, but I'm heavily relying on the Microsoft for Startup program. Their AI Azure credits are incredible. They give you also the flexibility of testing out different AI models in there. And there's a lot of other resources that are part of their structure for entrepreneurs. So I think it is, to me, one of the most robust startup programs that I've seen in terms of support. And they also have incredible network of resources like and knowledgeable experts like you. I think that's how we connected. So I'm very grateful for that. And we're also part of Google for Startups, which gives us iCloud credit because of the tool that we're using. It's using Firebase, which is a database that's supported by Google. We're also just recently joined NVIDIA. So, and there's also AWS has a startup program. So I think we're part of all four. But the thing is, like you refine your approach. Every opportunity has something that could be uniquely valuable. NVIDIA has a great also investor community as well. So as an entrepreneur, you have to seize your opportunities and not limit yourself, right? Like you have to say, what is relevant for me right now? Where can I grow to? What's most relevant for my team? NVIDIA has a great program for educating your AI experts on the team. Like they have an educational component that's really invaluable, and they're innovators in that field. So I'm piecing together all the parts, and I'm also using that to uniquely position us to our partners and investors to say, hey, we have a lower development cost. Because right now we can capitalize on some of these credits, we can test and fine tune our pricing while still have the opportunity to innovate quickly and cost effectively. So incredible programs that are out there. I think Microsoft is one of my top favorites. I'm very biased, but it just really robust for the early stage startup we were in when we started.
And then, when you use these different platforms like the Microsoft platform, are you yourself coding then? Because you do have a coding background. So,
Transparently, yes. When I started, I was doing it alone and I spent a lot more time than I needed to. And then
uh
I was watching YouTube, as one does when you're coding and learning, and a new tool. And I found somebody who was doing something similar in Africa and Nigeria. And I emailed him. I was like, hey, can you help me figure this out? So, that was a valuable lesson that it took me so much longer to do something on my own, although I could do it. I'm not an expert, but I could do it well enough. But when I brought other people on board, it really helped accelerate it. So that's a valuable lesson is like you have to pick your battles. You have to figure out what is most important to you. Yes, maybe you have limited resources, but will investing in somebody else take you that much further? And sometimes it's not even that they're helping you, it's also that you have the accountability, that it's not just you doing something that's going to push you along. So yes, I started coding. I'm still kind of able to go into all of our systems and kind of refine that. But now I have a CTO and an AI expert. So I have much more experienced coders also joining us to help accelerate this.
I mean, so you've got a SelfFull as a innovative self-development app that integrates microlearning, gamification, AI to empower users, right, on their personal
Yes.
growth journeys. And do you have users in that app? And what's the growth been like?
Yeah, so we started with about 60 beta users at the very first iteration of the beta. We interviewed about 45 of them so far. And again, this is just happening in the last couple of months. And so now we focused on creating a coaching app. So we're creating a small VIP tester community of coaches who are putting down some money to be in this group. And we're refining the coaching UI. At the same time, another pivot is like we found some of the coaches have larger corporate programs that they're supporting with their programs. And so now we signed an LOI and we're building other partnerships to support larger accelerators and coaching use cases where we take their education program and we build out the technological AI buddy component, the insight from the AI component, the ROI measurement and visuals that enhance both like the mentee and the mentor relationship. So one recent opportunity last month has been supporting these new partnerships. So we're talking to accelerators, we're talking to corporate coaching programs. So we are still continuing to grow the coaching app because it's a foundation that we can learn on as we're building the larger partnerships. And we're developing the technical roadmaps to support these larger technical use cases. So it's an exciting time, like where our strategy went from like B2C to B2B to now being like more of a corporate enterprise solution while we're still using some of the revenue model from subscription to be a foundation that has a shorter conversion cycle for us to kind of start off our business.
So Anya, outside of SelfFull, you're still on Right Off Track podcast. That's continuing.
To be transparent, I'm putting that on a hiatus. Like I really was holding on for a long time for that. And then I was like, what is the most important thing? Like as a startup owner, you have to realize like, and a mom and a friend and a human, like I can only take so much on. So what's the most important? I'm sure you have that all the time. You're traveling the world doing all this stuff. Like you have to realize like what do you have to let go of? And so I'm really grateful for Right Off Track and I want to continue it when we are able to and use it as a marketing tool for us. But right now, my intention and focus is on startup and also being a mom and doing the other thing and grounding myself and keeping myself healthy for this journey.
And then are there other activities outside that you still engage in? So
You know, one thing I'm very intentional, again, this is not traditional activity, but I'm really intentional about grounding myself, like meditation and things like that. And you may laugh, but I think it's so essential because when I get caught up in life, I'm like, oh, this is worrying. I have to do this. I have to work till midnight. And grounding myself, like, or having some kind of practice that helps you separate like this busyness with like, hey, you're on a planet in outer space, like really, like you don't take yourself so seriously. You're not a surgeon, it's not life or death. So I've been really intentional the last couple of months to like reflect on my headspace and where I'm at, and also ground myself in like just detaching from work a little bit. So start my day feeling like I'm grateful for this opportunity. I get to learn today. I'm not focusing about me being successful, but like how can I serve the people in front of me? Like you talk about servant leadership a lot, Steven, so I'm like really admire you in that space. But that's been helpful. And the other thing I'm excited about is doing more support for entrepreneurs in my community. So, for example, I'm going to go to my alma mater for women in business in UW and speak to them for an entrepreneurship event. So I'm also looking at ways to give back. Definitely not doing as much as I could be, but I hope to also ramp that up and help other people on this journey.
So what are your feelings about your family about your journey?
Great question. So, on the one hand, I'm very fortunate. So, my mom is the only one in the US. Everybody else is in Russia. And so, my mom has grown up. She never limited me. She always believed in me. So, I was very fortunate to have a parent who was like, "Oh, you're smart." Like I always tried to prove to her smart. She didn't care because she's like, "I know you're smart. I know you're going to do great." So, on the one hand, my mom is very supportive. On the other hand, transparently, my husband and his family are here, and here they are the ones I interact with the most. I don't think they can relate to what I'm doing as much. Like I'm like a big dreamer, a risk taker, and my husband does contracts. He's like very narrow and focused. But so it was challenging, especially when I began this journey. It's like, hey, I'm going to take this leap of faith. I'm going to do something that does not make sense to you guys at all, and yet it's okay. Like so, what I found is like you have to show people what you are doing to start building their trust. You can talk all you want, but people who are not in this space, not into entrepreneurship, not into AI, maybe like a different generation, like they don't. It's not going to seem cohesive. Like when you are very used to like a set work model, this feels like completely risky. And so what I learned is you have to yes, you can respect the opinions and the advice of your family. Ultimately, you have to decide what's right for you, and you have to stand your ground. So that was an important lesson for me. Like, although my husband supports me, like there were definitely a lot of conversations we had where I was like, I really need to do this. I need your support. And yet throughout that, it brought us closer. I don't think it's about a fighting and just saying like, hey, I'm right, you're wrong. It's about understanding the perspective of the other person in front of you, saying, I care about you. How can we bridge the middle gap? Because this means a lot to me. So I think we strengthened our relationship through that. And my husband now is a big supporter. Like one of the VCs that I'm actively talking to is because he recommended me. He sold me. He sold my company to this lady at a softball game who introduced me to this VC. And now like we're in serious talks. So now he's like a big supporter of me, but it was a journey. And it was definitely one of the hardest things I think for a relationship is to go through something like that. At the same time, it's definitely made us stronger.
So that's a really interesting sort of life arc, right? You come in as an immigrant, you go back to Russia, almost like, again like an immigrant in a sense, right? Because you lost a lot of the language, and then you're have to sort of navigate your way through the different cultures, also through school, and when a challenge appears, you don't think of it as a challenge, as you indicated, because you're so used to being thrust into new environments. You're very curious. You're good at math, um, and but you're also very curious, and that's why when you were doing your undergrad through three different universities, you were studying different areas, right? Like you said, accounting, and you had this thing about economics and math, and then you had this sort of broader perspective, including human rights and this global aspect as well. And then you graduate, and you're now taking contract work, and you're doing recruiting, but you're recruiting across Booking.com, Alaska Airlines, Amazon, Meta being the longest job, but you were able to transform those contracts into a full-time employment. And then while there, you ended up going for your MBA, and then also getting a Master of Science degree where you're doing the analytics, the AI, the coding stuff. You're getting a really solid technical foundation. And then you continue on this, and you leave Meta, and you start this podcast because you want to continue this exploration. And then you start this company, a SelfFull. SelfFull, which is about integrating microlearning, gamification, AI to empower users, which is now becoming sort of coaching focused. And you realize that you got all these different aspects of your life. So you're giving back. So you're helping with entrepreneurship, coaching, you're doing your own coaching of people with entrepreneurship. But you're also very conscious of your family, making sure that you're putting time into your family as well. Where do you see yourself? And this is the last sort of set of questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And what's your ultimate goal in, let's say, in 5 years?
I'm going to give you a really bad answer. I'm really consciously trying not to set goals for myself out there. And I say that because my focus and intention is to be grounded and serve to my best of my abilities, to learn as much as I can, and yeah, and be grateful for wherever it leads me. I know it's a really unsatisfying. Like in my logical sense was like, hey, I want SelfFull to grow. I want it to have a bigger impact. I can have like world domination goals I can talk about through our growth strategy. At the heart level, though, I want to serve. Like I want our work, whatever I'm doing, is something that I'm helping others, where I'm being present in every moment, and yeah, being a good human. So 5 years, it's not about how much money I'm going to make. It's really, can I honor that intention to serve others and to be a good human, and to be more present and not get less of my head. So that's honestly my 5-year goal. Be present, happy, and purposeful.
Right. I can see the being in your head because you've got quite a diverse background, which means you're constantly thinking, things are entering your headspace, and I imagine then focus is an issue sometimes. um, this is the very last question then, and then what recommendations you want to give to the audience, and or questions you want to leave the audience?
I something I did powerful this start of the year is I thought about, where are the areas I'm most scared of? Like, what are the areas in my life I'm most scared of right now? And having an honest reflection. Apologies, my kitty's around here. Writing down the journal, and that was really powerful for me, because it sometimes, like, we're really afraid to slow down and see what areas just feel uncomfortable. And I think it's really good for us, especially at the beginning of the year where there's a lot of reflection, to see like what areas, like for me, it's being a mom. For me, it's, financial stability. For me, it's, all these things that I have. And I reflected, like, what are the fears around that? So I challenged, and what was really cathartic about it is I can see, like, what is my mindset around it. So yes, we can seem like we have it all together, but whatever we have in our head is what's going to limit us into your head. No matter if you're a successful entrepreneur, no matter what you have, it's really that inner foundation that's going to drive how you show up in the world and how you feel about it. So my challenge to everybody listening is, if you really want to get to a deeper level internally, is to have a 5 minute, 10-minute session where you look at, here are the biggest fears that I have, and how do I honestly feel about it? Like, not censoring yourself. Let that voice, like, really, like, here are the 5 things. Here's how I honestly feel about it. And then take a moment to reflect on that. What are the common themes around it? And I think if we take those moments and reflect on it, we get to show up differently in the world. We get to see like, why we're showing up a certain way, what's holding us back in every part of our life, and how can we compassionately make progress in areas that matter to me, to us, not just business wise, but life wise. And I think if we show up as whole humans, which is what my whole work is about, we can not only be more successful business wise and make more money, but we can also just have a better impact on the world and show up better for others.
Well, that's a great insight and sharing on your part, and placebo.
Спасибо, пожалуйста.
Thank you again for sharing so much with our audience, and really giving so many different recommendations throughout our talk today. And I really enjoyed our time together. So thank you again.
Stephen, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for creating space for this, for sharing so much about my background. And I know that this may not be the traditional kind of business insight podcast that people may expect from your background. At the same time, I do think that we're all humans, no matter how we show up. And that the foundation of what we do really makes a difference. And I was honestly really inspired when we first met, and I'll wrap up here, is like you talked about your servant leadership background. And I'm like inspired that somebody like to see everything you've accomplished, to have that as your root is really inspiring, because I truly believe that that's what also makes a big difference. So thank you for being an example of that.
And thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.